my name's Dan Rittmeister. My background is in technology education, and as Anna described, my background isn't actually in agriculture, it's in industrial arts, but a lot of experience using equipment and involved with policy, and particularly in the last 7 years, I've had a keen interest in the agricultural space and some of the safety issues there. In New South Wales, we've got quite a bit of agriculture happening in New South Wales schools and quite a few tractors on site. So I've certainly taken that on board and provide a lot of resources to schools to try and make sure we don't have any incidents. There's a quote there on the bottom of this screen: "We're one serious accident away from tractors being banned in schools." This isn't to say that we've had any issues with tractors in schools. However, just the climate the way it is, if there was something serious that happened, it would be a very easy solution for an education department to say we're just going to ban tractors on schools. But of course, in my view, I think they are very important to have in schools to make sure that we're teaching students the right practices and how to use them safely. So when they go home, they can stay safe, not just at school, but also in the rest of their lives. We'll do a quick recap on some of the statistics around it to, I guess, justify why it is we're spending so much time on this particular one. Talk a bit about what is our role as teachers, and then look at some of the things we can do in schools to try and protect our students and ourselves. Okay, here we go. So, quick quiz based on the information we had earlier. How many people were killed in 2021 on farm? And the answer is there were 46 deaths on farm in Australia last year. So these statistics are based on the Ag Health, which is part of CQUniversity, and they publish statistics. Well, they update them quite regularly, so you can actually use these resources with your students to try and explain how important it is that they're following the processes and procedures that you're teaching them. Of the 46 killed, how many were caused by tractors? And the answer here is 10. So 10 of the 46 on-farm deaths were caused by tractors. Interestingly, there were 9 on-farm deaths recorded for quad bikes. So quad bikes and tractors have very similar rates of fatalities on farm. Of the 46 who died on farm last year, how many were under 15? And that is 6 of the 46. So these are pretty high percentages. So over 20% were tractors, and 6 of those 46 were children under 15 years of age. So on that same report, this is a bit of a summary. Interestingly, 50% are people over 50. So some of our most experienced people are the ones being injured on farm. 14% was children under, oh, sorry, this is in the last 20 years. 14% were children under 14, 88% male, which is quite a significant statistic, that one. But also when you look at the total numbers of tractors in the last 20 years, tractor deaths is 261, quad bikes 204. So you can see that it's quite a significant factor, which is why we're taking these initiatives. If we look at agriculture as a whole, this graphic here was from Safe Work Australia. It noted that there were 49 deaths in 2020 in the transport, postal and warehousing industry, and 46 in agriculture. So while the number of deaths in agriculture was lower, if you look at that per 100,000 workers, this graph shows it here. So the top graph shows the total numbers of fatalities in those industries, agriculture being second there. However, when you put it per 100,000 people working in the industry, it's almost double in agriculture. So let's drill down a little bit more specific into what's happening with tractors. So this graphic shows, the data's a little bit old, but it's representative. It shows how people have been killed on tractors. So rollover is the highest incident. Hit by own vehicle is the second highest, which is often quite surprising to people. But that's from people jumping off the tractor while they're still moving, or the tractor moving while they're working on it, or like they've left it running or something like that. And as you can see, I won't go through all of them, but the numbers, I guess, of most concern is around the rollovers and hit by your own vehicle. And both of these can be managed better through better practices. So the biggest one being rollovers, and if you do some of that tractor training, they'll talk about the safety triangle or the safety zone. And that's that triangle as shown in this diagram. Whenever you get on the tractor, it's really important it has rollover protection and that you're wearing seatbelt. Now, the seatbelt isn't there for high-speed collisions or anything like that. It's intended to keep you in the seat in the event of a rollover, so you stay inside the roll bar and don't get caught between the roll bar and the ground or an object. So even at low speeds, critical you're wearing a seatbelt and that you stay within that safety zone. Now, this essentially rules out any passengers on your tractor. So you can't then go and sit other people on the guards or in front of you and things like that because they're not wearing a seatbelt or they're outside of that zone. Ages, this is a bit more detail on the runovers. And I guess a significant statistic here is the 1 to 9 year olds, the number of children under 9 or under, who were run over and killed by a tractor. You can see it's quite significant. So obviously they're not operating the tractor. So there's a significant risk to bystanders, people around. Also of note is the drop down in the 20 to 29 year olds, yet our most experienced people, 60 through to 79, accounts for a significant number of injuries from runovers. Okay, so a little bit about teachers and our roles in tractors. Just before I get started going through these points, so we're going to talk a bit about policy, a bit about the equipment you're using, you knowing what you're doing as a teacher, and how to model that best practice. But before that, I will just raise an important point for schools, and that's around handling this topic with sensitivity. We've run tractor training here in New South Wales. A few years ago, we put 120 teachers through. At the moment, we're in the process of doing another 96 teachers and farm assistants going through the training. And I don't think we've had a single workshop where somebody hasn't been able to tell us a story about a close friend, a family member, a neighbour that they know that was either severely injured or killed using a tractor. So when you're talking about this with your students, just be aware that it could be something fairly close to home to them, and just handle that with some sensitivity. It's actually quite common when you get large groups together, it's particularly in rural areas, for them to know somebody or have somebody in their family who's been injured by a tractor. Okay, so we're going to start with Know Your Policy. Now, in New South Wales, we do have quite a bit of policy around equipment use. Is there a policy in your organisation? So your policy could be based at the state government, could be based at sector, school, within your faculty, or maybe you don't know if there is one at all. The policy, any policy, is important because it protects you. Even if it's a school-based policy or even a faculty-based policy within your school, it's a piece of paper that says that this is the procedure we're going to follow. So the first thing to do, because I know we have people coming to this from all over Australia, is find out if there is a policy, and if it is, there is one, are you following it? If you know it's there, when did you last check it? Because these policies do change from time to time, so it's probably worth once a year at least to follow up those policies and see where they are, to see where they're at, see if anything's changed, and see if you need to change some of your local procedures. If there is no policy from your sector, and as I said, the Department of Education in New South Wales has some tractor policy that affects all of the public schools in New South Wales. There's a lot of public schools in New South Wales, something like 2,200. So we have a lot of policy and governance and support in that area. But a lot of the independent schools and other sectors may not have that sort of support. So if you haven't got an external policy, do you need to create one for your school? If you did create a policy, what would be in it? So here's a little bit of information out of the New South Wales policy. First one is the tractor that you use with students has to be an approved tractor, and it has to have particular safety features installed on it. And we'll go through some of them in a minute. We have age limits. So minimum age is 12 years old. So students under 12 are not permitted to use the tractors. We have different rules about who can use implements and attachments and what sorts of attachments different students can use. We also have some policy around qualifications required in order to teach students, and also the procedures that you use. We have a requirement for safety tests, so we have some evidence that the students at that point in time were aware of what the procedures were, and some rules around the use of PPE. This little table here shows, for example, the different sizes of tractors, just as an example. So years 7 and 8 can operate a tractor up to 25 kilowatts. So we have 6 models in schools. There's small, medium, and large sizes. The John Deeres were the older ones before we moved to a different contract with the Kubota. But the larger of those 3, a student in years 7 and 8 is not permitted to operate those larger tractors. They can only operate the smaller ones, and only without an implement attached. They can't operate them with an implement. Okay. So here's a bit of an excerpt out of that policy. The instruction of student in the safe use is not to be undertaken as a training course, must only be undertaken by qualified teachers who have a certificate of attainment, which is that operate tractors, or similar industry experience. Now, in New South Wales, the principal determines whether the similar experience is enough for you to be able to operate and supervise and teach tractor operation with students. Our preference is, of course, the formal qualification. This is out of that same document about how we go about the teaching. So we start with the static control, switching the engine on and off, eventually leading to tractor motion. Remembering that this could potentially be the first vehicle these students have actually operated. Must always be on level surfaces. And of course, there's restrictions on who can operate the tractors with implements. So year 9, 10, 11, and 12 can use an implement. Year 7 and 8 cannot. When it comes to attaching implements, year 11 and 12 can attach them, but year 9 and 10 can't. The teacher has to do that. You can demonstrate it to the students, but they can't actually do the attaching. And I believe that's some risk management around the PTO shafts. So this is what part of our policy looks like. We have a document called Equipment Safety in Schools, and it's got a lot of equipment in it, from hand tools through to power tools and fixed plant, but also tractors and implements. So this is the one on tractors, and as you can see, it specifies what has to be, what the controls are that must be observed by the students. Some of the PPE that needs to be worn, like enclosed leather shoes, no jewelry, hearing protection. One second. Oh. Sorry. And some of the instruction. Okay. So let's look at some of the equipment. It's critical that the equipment you give to students to use is safe and has all the safety features operational. This is some of the extra, or some of the requirements for the tractors in New South Wales schools that the students operate. They've all got to have rollover protection, which is standard these days on tractors with a seatbelt, but also warning lights, audible reverse alarm. I won't go through them all, but these are the standard features of the tractors in New South Wales. A couple I will draw attention to: the offside entry prevention bar. That's a bar that sits on one side of the tractor to prevent students getting in and out from that side. A safety step. So it's the step to get up onto the tractor, but it's got an extra plate at the back to stop your foot slipping right through it, because what can happen is, if you've got a bit of mud on your boots, you put your foot up on the step, and if you slide through it and fall over, you can actually break your leg. So that was one of the requirements. We can lock out high range. Students are only allowed to operate the tractors on low range. One of the alarms on the tractor, this one here, an audible alarm, so that when an implement is raised, if the engine is turned off, that it'll sound an alarm so that it's a reminder for the operator to lower the implement. So just in case somebody was underneath and knocked the lever and it dropped down, which has happened, and as a result, we've had that requirement put on there. But probably one of the most notable features is a remote control cutoff switch. So it's a little button that the teacher can hold in their hand that could operate at some distance. So if the tractor's moving along and the teacher wants to stop the tractor, you can just hit the remote control button and it'll automatically turn that tractor off. You need to make sure that it's well maintained. Keep some good service records, do your pre-start checks, and make sure your pre-start checks include the safety equipment, things like the seatbelt, testing the automatic shutoffs and things like that. There is also a cutoff button, an emergency stop button on the guard. So making sure that that's included in your pre-start checks, that all those little things are operational. It is important that you keep the tractor in good state of repair, and as well, not just the tractor, but also the implements. If you're servicing the tractor, make sure you use the manual, because there's a lot of grease points and things like that that are hidden and often hard to find. So make sure if you are servicing the tractor at school that you're following all of those procedures. Have a plan for the replacement upgrade of the tractor after, it could be 10, 15 years, depending on how much the tractor is used. And of course, making sure the ROPS, and if it's got falling object protection, is in good condition. Nobody's drilled them or anything like that. We did have some instance where the rollover protection was drilled to fit fire extinguishers, which is a problem. They had to all be replaced. And of course, the other factor is knowing what you're doing. So as a teacher, make sure that when you're instructing students, you know the right things to be teaching or the right procedures so that students are picking up good habits. As I said, there are lots of courses out there. The ASQA accredited courses are a quality course that goes right through the safety and operation of the tractors. It's a 2-day course. That's that AHC MOM 202 operate tractors. And in New South Wales, we've run, as I said, there are 220 teachers through in 2018, and we're at the process of doing another 96 teachers at the moment. We're actually at that venue now, ready to run some training tomorrow. Modelling best practice is critical. You can tell a student 1,000 times to put hearing protection on when they're operating a tractor, but they've only got to see you not do it once, and then they understand that that's not important. Obviously, it is important. So whenever you're operating the tractor or your farm assistant's operating the tractor, anyone in your school, make sure they're using the same processes as you're teaching your students, so they're not seeing you doing something different, which essentially gives them permission to not do it. When you're using tractors in school, think about the risk to both the operator and bystanders. So if you're thinking about putting high-vis vests on your students who are operating the tractor, it's just as important that the students around the tractor in that same area also have high-vis on. The operator stays in the tractor. It's the other people walking around that are more at risk of run over. Make sure students know the risks, that you've actually explained that to them. Using some of those statistics and data can be very powerful. Again, just being conscious of being sensitive about that, but it can be very powerful in reinforcing how important this is. Make sure all the PPE is available and used. So make sure your school has all that those resources available. I know a lot of training organisations went away from earmuffs for hearing protection, gone to earplugs through COVID. So each person would have their own set of earplugs rather than earmuffs. But again, it depends on your school and what's convenient for you to use. The good thing about earmuffs is they're always there and findable, whereas the earplugs are disposable. So you'd have to have a good supply on hand. Never have passengers on the tractor. No exceptions to that one. Don't get on or off a moving tractor. A lot of incidents happen where somebody might put the tractor in low range and let it keep rolling while they jump off the tractor, go and open the gate, the tractor rolls through and they close the gate again. It only takes one mishap, slip, fall when you're stepping off, because as you step off the tractor, you are between the wheels, you're between the front and back wheels. It doesn't take much to get caught in that space. So make sure it's completely stationary before you get on or off the tractor. The tractors in New South Wales have seat switches, so when you stand up from the seat, the tractor will stop. Will actually turn itself off. So that's another feature that we have in there. Pre-start checks can be part of your lesson, and that will reinforce to students how important that is to make sure all the safety equipment is operational. Check the environment. So before you get the students out into the paddock, go and check that there's no fences, bits of wire, logs, holes, anything that could get in the way or cause problems, lumps of concrete, anything that could be in that paddock. And of course, if there are obstacles that you need to avoid, put some witches' hats around it so it's very clear where the boundaries are. Always get on and off the tractor on the left and install additional safety items if you can. These are just a few images of some of the safety items we have on the tractors here in New South Wales. You can see the safety shut-off button on the guard, plus the remote control, the transmitter that the teacher can have in their hand, the side entry prevention. That's the safety step there with the plate at the back to stop your foot slipping through, and of course fire extinguishers, which are attached to the tractors, not necessarily screwed there into the ROPS. The other thing with fire extinguishers is if they're powder type, which they should be, every now and then just give them a bit of a shake, just knock them a bit to make sure the powder is free and loose inside them, so that if there is a fire, that it will actually operate properly. Risk assess all the different implements. As I said, in New South Wales, where we've got a lot of schools, so we've got a lot of policy. There is a risk assessment for a lot of the implements and attachments that go on the tractors, particularly around PTOs. Make sure the PTOs are fitted properly and that they have good guards in good condition, the PTO covers, and that they are also tethered by a chain. So this one here, it's not fitted to the tractor, but it has the chain there attached. That would have been attached to the guard on the back of the tractor to stop the PTO cover spinning with the shaft, and that's critical. That should be stationary when the PTO is turning underneath. That's very important, because if the outside is turning, even though it should be turning separate to the shaft, if there's any debris caught in the end, that will turn and you can get caught in that, and those injuries are quite severe. Okay, so that's a very brief introduction to tractors and the operation of tractors in schools and the sorts of things we should be teaching students, and a few ways for us to protect our students. One of the takeaways here is that the policy does protect you. So having a policy in a school is very powerful. If your sector doesn't have one, or there isn't one from higher up, in making a decision and having people follow it, but also, you can say you're following that policy, and as long as you're following the policy, you should be quite safe with your students.